everybody. We are here. As Kid Fury would say, our titties have been fluffed. We're showing them off. We've all got some wine, and we're ready to talk boobies.
Mm-hmm.
So, welcome to Pink Spots and our monthly sex stream. I'm here with Mexie from the YouTube channel Mexie and Kathrin from the YouTube channel Kathrin. Hello. Also, dear friends of mine. And today we just wanted to have fun. We wanted to have a more casual stream, laugh a bit, and talk about boobs. So that's what we're going to do. Before we get into it, we want to say, obviously, we are three white people, and my two friends here are cisgender. So we have certain experiences, and we don't have certain experiences. So we're going to try to have a pretty good holistic chat here, but also acknowledge that there's a lot of stuff we just don't know, we haven't experienced. So just want to make some space for that. So to kick it off, Mexie, do you feel comfortable getting us started to talk about the sexualization of the breast and how that it has impacted all of us?
Sure. Well, I mean, I feel like we're going to be talking about that in many different ways throughout the stream. But do you want to start with, I guess, like how it's impacted us directly growing up? Maybe
Sure.
That could be a place that we start, and then go into more systemic stuff. I feel like this is going to be a fun combo, but I also feel like there's going to be points where it's actually kind of a downer.
Yeah.
Or
As usual.
As usual.
I try to get my boobs up today, and they're just not. This is what happens when you're almost 40, kids. You try to show them off, and you just can't even get them up that high.
My boobs are tiny, but they still start really low. It's like really, really low down.
Yeah, mine start really low as well.
Yeah, that's another thing about boobs. I guess we'll get into that later, but the kind of image of the boob being like super, super perky and super up high, like near your chin.
Yes.
It's like, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I wanted to share, that's another, you just reminded me, I wanted to share this. It's like an online repository. And I found it through watching someone's video who was talking about the breast job that they did, the plastic surgery that they got on their breasts. But how like in trying to make the decision about whether they were going to do it, they were looking through this. It's like a real boob repository, and it's basically just photos of like actual women's breasts, like just like normal breasts. And like the difference between all the different women is so stark, right? And it just shows like average ass breasts that like you would never see in a movie, you would never see whatever, but it's just kind of normalizing. I think it's a really good resource. I think we should link it in the show notes, so I'll find it.
Yeah, I would love to.
That. Yeah.
That's like, I don't know if y'all remember the movie, oh my God, what's the name of the movie? The one with Kevin Spacey and Mina, what's her face? American Beauty. That's what it was.
Oh.
But the daughter in that movie, I forget the actress's name, but she shows her breasts and they looked like mine.
Mm-hmm.
And that was I just remember that was the first time I'd ever seen someone have breasts in a movie that looked like mine, because they were more of the pendulous shape and they weren't like these small perky kind of things. And I was like, oh my God. Because just to get into it, like I really felt growing up that my boobs were extremely abnormal because I never saw boobs that looked like mine. And given that they were always so big, this was really difficult for me because it was like boys always wanted to see them, but then they would be disappointed when they saw them. And I would always feel really insecure because I knew they didn't look like what everyone was expecting them to look like. And that was, really difficult. So I think a resource like that where you can go and see that, no, they're all different shapes, they're all different sizes.
Yes.
A lot of them are asymmetrical.
Yeah.
And that's like totally normal.
Yeah, one of mine is really bigger. It's very normal to have one bigger.
Yeah, I always say that, and I don't know which one of mine is, but
I definitely have one bigger. But thanks for sharing that about growing up. I feel like growing up, like developing breasts was like one of the main things that taught me about how I was supposed to perform as a woman, and how I was valued as a woman and whatnot. Because when I was growing up, like, I wasn't in like a really bigger body, but I was overweight. Like I wasn't stick thin, and kind of at the time it was like you need to be really real thin to be considered attractive to the male gaze and whatnot. So I felt kind of unattractive a lot of my childhood, and felt kind of like, you know, I was getting messages that like I wasn't deserving of like love because of that. But then I ended up developing boobs really, really young. So in like grade 7, I had like I just had really big boobs, right? It's basically like what I have now. It was like, that was me in grade 7. And then all of a sudden it was like, okay, well now I'm getting attention, right? Like now it's like, now it's like the only thing that people can see about me, you know? And I started to really like latch on to that, because again, previously I felt like I was unattracted to the male gaze, and that felt horrible as a young woman growing up, like feeling like you're overweight or whatever. Like that's such a struggle, especially in a society that places so much value on how we look. So then like, yeah, when I had the, you know, these breasts, I still was like a bit of a bigger girl, but it was like, okay, but now I'm getting all this attention, right? And so it was kind of a mind fuck for me, because like being sexualized that young, or it just really taught me like, it's hard to explain, I guess, but it just really taught me about like my value. And I started to place a lot of value on my breasts, and started to feel like they were like the best thing about me. And that like, if I wanted to get anyone to date me, then I had to like highlight my boobs, because that was like the one selling point that I had, you know, to prove my value cut to the male gaze or whatnot. But then because I wasn't like really thin, like I was still attractive, I think, but like I wasn't like the picture perfect kind of vision for the male gaze. So a lot of men, I feel like, would treat me even more like a sexual object, because I was just literally boobs to them. Like I was just literally big tits, and I came to associate my value with that. And so it became really kind of fucked up, sorry, in my teens, right? So yeah.
I can relate. I have pretty similar story. I remember being in, I think it was 6th grade, and I had like a B cup, and feeling just like devastated because there's this girl who had like a D cup already somehow, poor thing. And, you know, she got a lot of attention from men. And so I was like so jealous. And then within the next year, I also had like D's or double D's, and I just hated them ever since then. It just was such a horrific experience. And I had a similar feeling, like I had always wanted a breast reduction, but at the same time I would have this feeling like that I was going to lose value if I did that. And that was part of understanding that I'm queer and genderqueer, like was super liberating from that perspective, because like I just always, like whenever I would date someone, it was a focal point for them. Even if they didn't love the shape as much, they still loved the size of them. And it was just such a big deal. And it also, you know, I experienced sexualization very, very young. Like I remember being 14 and getting hit on by like guys in their 40s at like the video store or something. It was just weird. And just realizing that like I still felt very much like a child, but that other people were not interpreting me that way, or you know, whatever, was really upsetting to me. And I didn't like that attention, even as much as I still was internalizing that this was part of my value.
I think it really contributes to pedophilic culture in general, because it's seen that boobs are associated with womanhood or adulthood or maturity. So it's always sort of justified, like, oh, it's fine that we're sexualizing, I don't know, Bad Baby, even though she's 16 or 17, because she has big boobs, or it's fine that I'm attracted to this young girl because she looks like a woman. But it's like, that's not the point. And I think that's a really big problem with like the sexualization of boobs in general. I feel like I kind of had the opposite experience, because I've always been very flat-chested, and I basically just don't fit into any bras at all. All of them are just too big. Even like the tiniest one is just too big for me. And I think my boobs haven't grown since I was like 12 years old or something. And I tried all kinds of devices. I bought one of those suction things.
Oh no.
I don't know if you've ever seen them, but
I've seen those.
You kind of like, you stick it on your boob and then you just like ferociously rub it. And I used to get so many bruises all over my boob. And I used to have this morning routine where I'd wake up and then I would just like rub my boob, and it's ridiculous because I now have stretch marks on my boobs, even though there's no boob there, just from like the ferocious sucking and rubbing sensations that I did to it. I honestly feel like I permanently ruined my boobs. I don't know. I'm kind of worried about this now. But anyways, but I think I kind of had the other the different experience, because I think I was always infantilized, and I still feel like I'm often infantilized. And I think that there's probably a lot of reasons for that, but I do think that having no boobs or very small boobs contributes to that. It's like you're always seen as like this perpetual little child, rather than a genuine, like, I don't know, adult woman, because it's like you're not really a real woman until you develop any kind of breasts. And I also got so many, they used to sing a song to me like Kathrin from the Itty Bitty Titty Committee, like stuff like that. And you have like, what do they call them, like mosquito bites and fried eggs and like, oh my god, the amount of times I would stick like chicken fillets and like wear 3 bras at once and like other kind of strategies to make them bigger. So yeah, I definitely think like there's like no way to win unless you're somehow got like the perfect middle ground. But even then, it has to sort of fit with your body. It can't be too big, it can't be too small. And so yeah, there's no real way to win with this situation. So
yeah, I was just thinking that I'm like, it's a double-edged sword, because for me it's like, yeah, I was sexualized young and like obviously attached value to my breasts and whatever, and people like, yeah, there's no way to win because I had big boobs. Like if they were showing at all, people would treat me like I was like a ditz, right? Like, cause it's like, oh, you're just a bimbo with big tits. But if you don't have them, as you said, you're being completely mocked and harassed because you're not fitting into this vision of like the male gaze and whatnot. But yeah, it's so funny because even with my boobs being big, I'm sure you all came across it, like these like, I mean, well, you obviously did, Kathrin, because you bought the suction cups, but there was also these like, you know, like old wives' tales about like how to make your boobs bigger. And one of them was like a massage technique. And I would do that even though I had big boobs, because it was so ingrained in me that like, yeah, this is my value kind of thing. Yeah, it's just so ridiculous. But then same with you, Nicole, like I would get so much back pain. Like I had really bad back pain. Cause it's like, it's actually hard to have good posture and like, you know, hold them up or whatever. So my mom was talking about getting a reduction, and she was like, yeah, you should get one too if you're having all this back pain. But again, yeah, I was just like, well, I can't do that. That's like literally my only value to men is like my breasts, even though it makes them treat me like an object. It was like among women, it was kind of like a status thing, you know what I mean? And among like men, it was like, oh, well, like my boyfriends can brag to their friends that like they're dating this woman with big tits, you know? So it was really like this hierarchy of being attracted to the male gaze, even though like that's never, you know, even though that gives you some power, and like, you know, keeps you from some kinds of harassment or, you know, belittling. It's like, again, yeah, you never win.
You don't.
Yeah.
And I know, Mexie, I don't know if you had this, but like boys would speculate all the time if my boobs were fake, and they would be like the topic of conversation with people I didn't even know. Like I would find out from my friend / boyfriend at the time that like, oh, the guys at this table were talking about you when you walked by today.
Yeah.
And it was just like, ugh. I think especially being like a autistic introvert, the idea of people looking at me when I'm just like in my own head walking around and having these kinds of conversations was just so horrifying to me. And then Kathrin, on the opposite side of things, I also had nicknames. Like one of them was Big Titty Nikki. So
oh my god,
call me BTN. And then So stupid. And then also like big naturals or big like you know Natural Ice, the beer. People would call me well, it's a very, very cheap brand of beer. It's Natural Ice. So we would call it Natty Ice. And so everyone would call me like Big Natties, like Big Naturals. Stupid. But it was like so apparent from a very young age that this was like my defining feature.
Yes. Yeah.
You know, and that this was what made me different and special and notable, even if it was in this extremely negative way. So yeah, every time I thought about having autonomy over my body and like sculpting it in the way that I wanted it to be, I would just immediately have this fear of like, it was like an identity crisis. Of like, I don't even want them, but who would I be without them? And that haunted me for a really long time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as an autistic person, like just perceive, because I would perceive when people were looking at me, even though I wouldn't like look at them directly, but like just perceiving that, like walking into a room and knowing that all these people are just staring at my boobs is like really intense. And then like, you know, I would have partners who were pretty steeped in the patriarchy, and you know, they obviously made such a big deal out of my boobs. But like, if we like went to like a swimming pool or like a swim park or whatever, and I was like walking and like men were looking at me, like they would just like lose their shit, right? Because they're just like, everyone's staring at your boobs, you know, they were just like enraged, right? And I'm like, well, like, fuck the patriarchy. Like, what can I say? Like, stop sexualizing me. I can't, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think that you can really see the ways in which their like boobs are objectified in the way in which men have sex with you, depending on what the defining feature is of you. Because I know that for a lot of my friends with bigger boobs, they say like there are certain positions that the men will exclusively want to do with them because of those boobs. But with me, I feel like the majority of positions that men will throw me into, even though I don't even want them, is like stuff that is like predominantly from behind, because I feel like I have more, I guess my defining feature, if you can call it that, is more my arse than my boobs. And I think that, yeah, it really impacts like what is, I don't know, I think it just shows how when you're having sex with someone, you're not really being treated as this human being together, coming together to have a great time. It's like, oh, which part of you can I exploit or can I objectify most for the most gratification, regardless of what it is that you actually want, because I definitely did not want that constantly.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and you've said your boobs are very sensitive, which I think is common for smaller breasts. So the fact that people aren't playing with them as much is actually like
so
a huge
annoying.
missed opportunity. Yeah, and so
I know.
Annoying.
Yeah, I actually read that the smaller your boobs are, well, obviously it completely depends on the person, but a lot of the time, the smaller they are, the more sensitive, because you have the same amount of nerve endings, apparently, depending on whether everyone has the same amount of nerve endings. And so if you have smaller boobs, then they're supposed to be like closer together, which means that you're more likely to be more sensitive. But yeah, I'm talking about cis women. I'm not sure what the situation is for other people. But yeah, I think that, so as a result, I'm like, please just take them in whatever way. Although actually no, because then it's like super aggressive, like with biting and I don't know, other stuff like that. So I don't know, again, you can't really win. But I think it's so annoying because with big boobs, I think everyone is so obsessed with them. So, or at least men under the patriarchy are obsessed with them. So then they want to touch them loads. But then my big boob friends are like, well, I'm not really feeling anything here. Whereas I'm like, I want you to play with my boobs, but no one wants to because they're small. So it's so annoying.
Yeah, that's so annoying. And yeah, it's like, it's so apparent just how, because growing up, I'm sure you all heard like, you know, all the boys in class around you talking about like whether they're a boob man or an ass man, you know?
Yeah.
And then it just, you know, it's just, I can't believe honestly, like how how objectified women are in our society, you know, and like how long this has gone on. It's like, really, we're in the year of our Lord, like 2021, and we're still like men are still talking about whether they're a boob man or an ass man, you know, just like completely reducing women to specific body parts. It's just like unbelievable. But yeah.
Yeah, and I remember my mom telling me a story about dating someone in high school. And, you know, he was kind of out of her league, and she was like so surprised that he asked her out, and like she couldn't believe it. And then, yeah, he just ended up eventually telling her that he was just dating her for her boobs. And it's like the fact that you could like engage with someone literally on one body part and not even have any attraction to any of the rest of them is like wild to me.
Yeah. That's like, to me, that's like violent. Like, that's actually really violent. Yeah. Like, it's completely dehumanizing, you know?
Yeah. And that's how she felt, you know, when he broke up with her and told her that. It was just, because I think that's what happened. Yeah. He broke up with her and was like, well, I was just dating you for your boobs. And she was just like, felt so dehumanized.
Yeah.
And it's like, how could you not? You know, that's horrible.
Yeah. And that kind of stuff makes you spiral too. Because then like, it's just kind of like, you just have no self-esteem, right? And then you end up doing stuff based on because then you internalize like, okay, well, this is my only value. This is the only reason why I deserve anyone to be with me. You know what I mean? So it's like you accept that kind of like objectification from other people because it's like, ugh. Anyway.
Yeah, and it's crazy because I used to, I started working when I turned 16, and I would earn like £3.50 an hour, and like work every weekend after school. And I can't believe like the predominant reason why I decided to get a job was so that I could save for a boob job. And now I look back and I think like the amount of weekends of my childhood, I lost the amount of evenings, like, I don't know, always just working for £3.50 an hour, which is like no money at all, for, I don't know, in this horrible waitressing position, just so that I could save for a boob job. And it's like, what kind of, I don't know, ideals are we teaching young people when my aims weren't, oh, let me save money so that I can change the world. Let me save money so I can live a happy, fulfilled life. It's like, no, I was saving money just so I can have a boob job. It's like,
Yeah.
I also read that there's actually studies that show that the smaller your boobs are, the more likely you are to get a job, and the bigger they are, the more likely you are to be seen as unintelligent, because like big boobs are associated with bimbos, or I don't know, the more ditzy, the more stupid, blah blah blah. And the smaller your boobs, and I think I've definitely benefited from that in job positions, because I think I can really desexualize my body in a lot of ways with the way that I dress. Whereas I guess if you're more curvy in a lot of ways, it's a lot harder to be, you go for an interview and probably you're immediately taken less seriously, seen as less intelligent. Whereas if you're tall and uncurvy, then people are more likely to think you are more intelligent, which is just it's crazy.
It's gross.
I struggled with dress codes because of that. Like, I would dress the same way that and I think I mentioned this on a stream recently, but I would dress the same way as other people, but I would get called on like violating the dress code because I was curvy and they weren't. So everything on me was just read as more like sexualized or inappropriate than it was on someone else. And it's also just really hard. Like, I don't know that other people understand that when you have huge tits, like, they just do what they want to do. Like, I'll have t-shirts where I'm like, oh, I'm just going to wear a t-shirt. And then it's like, I have cleavage. And I'm like, where did this come from? Like, I'm just trying to wear a fucking t-shirt. And your boobs just, like, pop out of everything. So I think there's a lot of ideas about, you know, people showing off their breasts and wanting to get attention. And that can be true, and like, all the power to you if that's what you want, but a lot of times it's just that like clothes fit you differently and you're not really intentionally doing any of this stuff. And it's also like where your boobs start and what shape they have. Like, all of these things can just change how much you're like showing it off, you know?
Yeah.
Showing it off.
Yeah. No, exactly. Yeah.
Do you find that having big boobs kind of intersects with fat phobia in any ways? Because I know that there's generally the association, like, oh, if you have bigger boobs, that means that you're in a larger body. On the smaller boobs you have the the smaller your body is in general. And I wonder, especially, I guess, if you're in videos and then people can only really see your boobs and stuff, if like there is, I don't know, I'm just interested how it all kind of intersects.
Yeah, I know for me, I was much thinner when I was younger, but I still had very large boobs, and it makes like the thing. Well, first of all, that's a big reason why a lot of people thought they were fake. Although I don't know if they actually thought that they were fake, but or if they just wanted to talk about me. But also, it was really difficult to find clothes. Like a lot
I
of
still
stuff,
can't find clothes.
Yeah, a lot of stuff like that had the right cup size would be large, like a large or extra large size. So there was just seemed to be no awareness of the fact that like people have different bodies, and you can have big boobs and have a smaller body, or bigger body and a smaller boobs, you know. And it was really difficult. I think now there's maybe, well, and I also, when I was a working professional, I had more money to kind of go to like boutique shops and stuff where I could find like a swimsuit that would have like a cup and a band size. But when you're a teenager and you're just shopping at like Victoria's Secret or Abercrombie or wherever people shop, like you just realize like there's no like understanding of my body here.
No.
There's nowhere for me. Like so many times I've worn swimsuits way too small because I was like, this is what I have to do. Or I would get those like string bikinis in like an extra large and then just tie them like really, really tight. But yeah, it was this weird thing where it's like you're supposed to be skinny with big boobs, but then there's no clothes for that.
Yeah, I still cannot find any clothes. Like honestly, and like
trying to find a button-down shirt, you can't do it.
Honestly, like button-down shirt never. And like over COVID, you know, I've been like, okay, I'm just gonna order like a few things, right? Whatever I order, and I'll look at things that, you know, in the pictures it looks like, okay, it looks like there's some good give there or whatever, and then I'll get it, and it's like you said, like if I want something that is actually going to fit my breast, it's going to be like a muumuu. But like even then, usually it doesn't work because it's like it'll be flowing out to here, like it'll be so big on the rest of my body, but like they'll have these like lines that like are supposed to go around where the boob is, but the lines, they're not far down enough for a bigger boob. So like the line is like in the middle of my boob. So I'm like, I can't wear this. If you had just made the line lower or just not put a line, like it would have been fine, but like I can't wear this because it looks ridiculous. And or it's like I'll have it like, you know, something flowing out to here, but it'll be so tight on my boobs that it'll look really weird. So yeah, I still have that trouble. So then I'm just like, and then I never want to like return the things. So I'm just like, all right, I'm just like gonna give this to charity or whatever. So I just like order things, try them on, and I'm like, is it gonna work? No, not enough boob. Okay, giving it to. So I have like all the stuff in my closet that I'm like, I guess I'm just gonna give this to charity because the boobs are too small. Yeah.
I know, like, for me, part of my struggle with wanting a breast reduction was having to, like, prove that I needed one for insurance. And I think, like, now as a genderqueer person, it's also interesting to me to realize that I don't know that I could get access to having this alteration to my body in like a queer way. I think I would still have to go about it in like a medicalized way because of the issues we have around like any gender affirming surgery. You have to prove that you feel about your gender in this very binary way. So I don't know, even though I would consider getting a breast reduction gender affirming, because I don't want to get necessarily top surgery. Like I don't want to change into having a male chest. I can't have access to that, even though for me it would be gender affirming. So I would still probably have to go about it in the sense of proving that I have back pain and that it's like this disability kind of thing. And then I worry about, you know, arguing with my doctor about how small to make them, because I would want them like very, very small.
Yeah.
And I just think like all of that highlights how fucked up our system is, because we don't give people autonomy over their bodies. We don't give people access to things that they need to feel like, you know, good in their bodies without medicalizing it. And we have, I was even just talking about disability today and just how frustrating it is that like you have to go in and like overly prove, like everyone knows having big breasts are difficult on your body. It's just a heavy strain on your body. But I know when I've tried to like look into it before, there was just like, oh, you have to prove like you have this history of having these back problems. You have to have all this evidence. And it's like, but you know, like you know that having big boobs are stressful on the body. So like, why do I even have to prove it? Why can't I just get this thing that I want to have?
Right. Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it'd be like really expensive as well.
Yes. Yeah. So expensive and really intense like recovery period, where you need a lot of support. You know, you would need like someone to help take care of you. So it's not like I just hate too how people think they're so flippant about any kind of surgery, whether it's gender affirming or otherwise. Because it's like, this is a big deal. This is like, this would be a hard thing. It would be expensive. It would be really difficult recovery. So it's not, I don't know why people think people are just like flippantly going in to get different surgeries.
Oh yeah.
And holding that as like a standard of like your gender identity or your disability. You know, part of why I never got a breast reduction was because I am disabled and I was nervous about having something that violent happen. I mean, it's like physically really, really taxing happen to my body because I haven't had good recovery for a long time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That should be covered, first of all. And for trans women as well, who, because it's the boob job is really expensive, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, that's just not accessible to a lot of people, which is not okay, you know?
And I know top surgery is like at least $10,000. And then for some people, it can get into the hundreds of thousands if there's complications. Like I was reading about.
God.
And it's not uncommon. Like you think like, oh, well, that probably just happens once in a while, but it's actually not uncommon for it to end up being anywhere from $50,000 to $200,000.
Wow.
Because people, like I read about one trans man who had ended up getting some kind of infection, and ended up running like $200,000 for him. And so it's not a small thing. And I just think like, the transphobia in all of it is so frustrating to me. I had that with a coworker because we had a trans woman started the company, and you know, he was making really transphobic comments, and one of them was this logic of like, well, if he's really a woman, then, I mean, this is what he was saying, so I'm sorry to misgender, but he was like, if he was really a woman, he would like get surgery. And I was like, do you like, you can't just like get surgery? And I'm like, she's probably transitioning. Like you have to do a lot before they even allow you to have surgery. So like she probably, like, this is her potentially working up to that if that's something that she wants to do. And I was like, beyond that, it's risky and it's fucking expensive. So you can't just say like, oh, just go get this thing done that takes a long time. I was like, you have to be on hormones for a while. You have to publicly transition, and you have to be living as that your gender for, I think, at least a year before you can get approved. I mean, there's like all of these hoops you have to jump through. And to just, I just think people throwing it out there and being so blasé about it is so ignorant. Someone asked if top surgery is usually covered by health insurance. I don't know. I think it depends. I think it's starting to be by some. Yeah, but it just depends on the insurance.
Mm-hmm.
I also think it's ridiculous that there's always, from what I understand, that if you want to get some sort of surgery, the therapist expects for you to have this story where you express just like how hard life has been for you and how terrible it is. And it can't come from a place of like, this is a joyous decision for me and I'm so excited for this. It has to be always this performance. I mean, it's not always a performance, but there's always this like mass expression of suffering. It's like, why can't we just accept this as like also just something that can be a beautiful like thing that people want to do and that is like they're so happy about, rather than this like re-traumatization of like having to like share with this random stranger all of your pain. If you even have pain, maybe you are just excited about it. And yeah, and I think like that is really violent as well.
Mm-hmm.
I agree.
Yeah, for sure. So, do we want to talk about Free the Nip?
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Yeah, so I wanted to bring up, and I don't know if, Nick, you were privy to this, because it was something that happened on Twitter a while ago. I know, Kathrin, you were a witness to it, but there was a lot of, like, boob discourse on leftist Twitter for a while, and there was like, one specific incident that I just found so ridiculous. So it was this person who had posted this tweet. It was like a retweet. So the original tweet was like, it was showing different kinds of breasts. And it was like small breasts, big breasts, breasts that are like lopsided or whatever. And the caption was like, all of these are still sexy. Like these are all still really sexy boobs or whatever, right? So trying to just like normalize different kinds of boobs. And the person who had commented or like retweeted or whatever was saying like, or how about we stop like sexualizing boobs, right? Like how about we stop sexualizing women's boobs? Leftist Twitter, let me tell you, had a fucking field day over this tweet. There were so many people who were like enraged by this, and they were just like, oh yeah, like why don't we just like desexualize sex while we're at it, you know, like why don't we just you know, like acting as if this is like a completely like sex negative kind of like bullshit thing to say, and that like of course breasts are sexualized, like come on, you know, like just really like upset about it. And you know, I know some people were coming from a place that they actually felt like this was like a sex negative tweet or something like that, and that they were trying to push back against that. So you know, I don't hold that against people. But the way that I was reading it was like, okay, but you know that the Free the Nipple movement, right, is about not sexualizing boobs. It's not about let's free the nipple so that we can walk around with our tits out and be like sexualized, objectified, harassed, you know, gawked at by men in the street all day. Like freeing the nipple is desexualizing the nipple, right? Like that's what we're talking about. So I just found that like on the face of it so laughable, and also so concerning, because I'm like, do people not understand what Free the Nipple is? And I think that a lot of people don't actually, because I remember being on like Instagram and like having like, you know, super sexy like Instagram supermodels like, you know, having photos of themselves in like a white t-shirt with water on them so you can see their boobs, and being like, oh, like free the nipple, you know, and then like all these men being like, yeah, free the nipple, yeah, free it, you know. And I'm just like, this is not what we're doing. This is not what we're doing, right? Like good fucking God, you know, this is not what we're doing. And like just through that, I started to think a lot more about like the sexualization of breasts in general, because like it's so interesting, like, you know, being in Europe, being on like nude beaches in Europe, right? And just like being in places where people are just really comfortable being in the nude. And in a place like that, it's like you're not sexualizing people like all day, every day, left and right, and objectifying them or whatever. It's just literally like, oh yeah, we're just all hanging out like with our bodies out, and like these are our human bodies, you know? Because if we actually did free the nip, like if all women were just walking around with their tits out all the time, it would become extremely mundane, right? Like seeing a breast wouldn't be like, oh my God, like it's so sexual. It would just be like, literally everyone's doing this. Your grandma has her tits out, like your mom, your aunt, like whatever. It's just like literally like mammary glands, right? Like it would just become so mundane that it wouldn't be sexual. And I know that you talked on like previous streams with Kyra and Mohira about like colonialism and how, you know, in so many places in the world and so many tribes, right, like women did walk around with their tits out all the time, and they still do. And they're not being sexualized, they're not being objectified, you know, and that like sexualizing boobs in so many places was a really Western construct, right?
Yes.
And like because of the male gaze and how the male gaze has been commodified through like capitalist markets, you know, porn, movies, everything, right? Like sex sells, right? It's like the vision that we have of women in general, like I said, that is just really focused on different body parts and like objectifying for their different body parts. Like that's a capitalist Western construct. But literally, if we were just walking around naked all day, like it wouldn't be sexual. It would just be like, okay, these are our bodies. And then sex would be expressed in a different way, right? Like sexual attraction, you know. And I find that so interesting and exciting to think about like how people could and would express their sexualities outside of patriarchy and capitalism and outside of systems that have like, because it's like a double-edged sword for us, right? Because it's like we need to cover our breasts up, because if we don't, we're going to be like, you know, harassed, objectified, gawked at, whatever. And that's because of like the male gaze. But like if we wait, I kind of lost my train of thought, but yeah, it's like, you know, the reason that they're so sexualized is because we need to cover them up, right? So that's kind of like a double-edged sword, right? It's like you have to cover them up, otherwise you'll be, you know, objectified and gawked at and whatever, or maybe even harassed. But because they are covered up, it makes them like a scandalous thing that it's like men are like trying to see them, right? Because it's like, oh, they're all covered up, we need to see them. And so that becomes sexualized in itself. Whereas like if we were literally just walking around with our tits out every day, it would just be like, oh, everyone's tits is out, like whatever, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I have such a problem with school dress codes, because I feel like that institutionalizes that at a young age, that, you know, a girl can't wear a girl can't wear a tank top because it's going to make the boys go crazy and be all distracted, and like no learning can happen. And it's like, but if everyone's just wearing whatever, then it gets normalized, and we don't have to have this sense of like that someone's body, like I don't think people understand how weird it is that we get so turned on by like a body part, or by someone being dressed a certain way, like that is like in the scope of human existence, that is a pretty modern concept. That we would, you know, because that's what Mohira talked about on that stream, was like in India, it's very common to just have your midriff showing, and it's not sexual. It's just, it's a common thing. You see it everywhere, but you have it here, and there's a certain connotation to that, and it's something that is seen as sexual. And I know, like for me, I've always wanted to be able to sunbathe topless. I actually would find it pretty like gender affirming to be able to walk around without a shirt on and not be read as female, and also not be sexualized. And so that's what like Free the Nip is really about. It's about like giving women, yes, but also all people the autonomy over their body to be able to just safely navigate the world in a way that they feel comfortable, and not have to be sexualized and not have to be gendered. There's stuff like on Instagram, I know of in particular, you know, they try to screen for female nipples. So it's like if the algorithm thinks you're a guy, then you can show your nipples. But if they think you're a woman, then you get censored. And we can see that this is obviously really harmful for trans people, you know, who may identify a certain way and want to walk around and like have pictures showing themselves. You know, and that doesn't have to be inherently sexual, and it also doesn't have to be inherently gendered.
Yeah. And the sexualization of boobs and actually bringing in bras was a part of the colonial project. Like prior to our colonizing half the globe, like so many other countries didn't even have didn't have such thing as a bra, or they didn't have the sexualization of boobs. And it wasn't until we came along that we started institutionalizing all of this stuff. And to be honest, I used to be one of those people that was like, oh, I don't understand free the nipples, because like obviously boobs are sexual. But I think I kind of got round, or like I changed my mind when I realized just like the violence of, I don't think a lot of people realize the violence of constantly being seen as a sexual object and constantly being objectified, and feeling like your primary worth is based on your physicality rather than like literally anything else. And I think that is like the fundamental, or one of the fundamental issues when it comes to free the nipples. It's like we don't want to have to be constantly reminded that we are just seen as these objects to be used for other people's gratification. And I think, I don't know, I think that's what a lot of the time gets missed. But at the same time, I do know that I think there are valid criticisms of the free the nipple movement, or at least some iterations of it, because I know that some of it was quite like a white feminist thing. And then there's a lot of problems with this kind of empowerment narrative, or I don't know, because a lot of the time it became all about like choice feminism without kind of acknowledging the structural limitations to the choices that we make. So I don't know, and then it can become this like double guilt, because it's like I don't feel comfortable to show my nipples, but then you're made to feel bad for not feeling empowered enough to be able to do that. And so I think there are valid criticisms, but fundamentally I do think like free the nipples is an incredible idea.
It's like only an incredible idea though if breasts are desexualized, you know what I mean? Because if it's not, then it's just like, this is just all in service then of the male gaze, and we are not safe then to be walking around like that if the conditions under patriarchy and capitalism haven't changed. There's also like the double standards in our society where it's like, and I'm sure people have seen the memes where it's like, a breastfeeding mother, and people are just like, oh my God, like put your tits away, right? Like get this out of here. And then you like look up at a billboard and it's just like, like that's like the selling point of the ad.
There's like yogurt splattered all over him or something, and you're like, okay. I think that the ire for breastfeeding mothers is really interesting as well, because people get like repulsed. And I'm like, but this is the natural function of the breast. Like, why are you getting angry and disgusted with it? But I think it's because it reminds them like this is a function of the body. Right? Like it reminds them, or it shows them like this breast is being used in a way, in like an autonomous way.
That's not sexual.
It's not being like used for your pleasure, and it makes people so mad. And
exactly.
I think that's wild. Like you can walk down the street with your tits all fluffed up and out, and not that people won't have judgment of that, but like it's just funny to me, because I was with my friend when her child was small, and like we would go out to lunch and she would breastfeed if she needed to, always with like a cover up and the whole thing, which I don't even think someone should have to do that. But and there would be people who would just be like losing their minds, and it's like, but why though? Like if we were both here in cocktail dresses with our tits out, like you would be fine with it. You might be looking and talking in a different way, but you wouldn't be like repulsed and like angry. And I was like, always just thought that was funny. It's almost like you're reclaiming your breasts by using them to breastfeed.
I know.
Just wild to me.
Yeah, I feel like that's so telling, like when people are like repulsed and upset by that, because it's just like what the fuck? It's only because you've like sexualized my breast to such a degree that you're like you can't stand like seeing them, because it's like seeing a baby just like feeding from them. It's like it's like really desexualized, right? Or if it's like there's so many things that can happen to your breast when you're breastfeeding, and you have like I don't know, like veins, or like your breasts are like too full, and so they're like leaking or whatever, and there's like nothing like less sexy than that. So it's like people are just like pissed off that like, it's like, oh no, you're ruining breasts for me.
Like how dare you remind me that your body is your own and it might have other functions besides for me.
Yeah.
Like, sorry, dude.
But Alex says, do any of you three think the Free the Net movement would get to the point of success in our lifetimes? And I actually, like, I don't know, because honestly, I think that there's a lot of people, like I said, especially under patriarchy and capitalism, people are making a lot of money sexualizing breasts, and like,
Yeah.
you know, men and the patriarchy and the male gaze are very highly invested in sexualizing breasts, to the point that, like, yeah, I think a lot of people would be upset if like everyone was just, if like literally everyone had their tits out all the time and then breasts were just not sexual anymore. Because like, yeah, that's part of like the male gaze. It's like titillating to like have things that are like, you know, supposed to be sexy and like off limits and things like that. Like it's titillating to like to objectify people in that way, right? So I don't know, honestly, if we'll see that in our lifetime. And I think a lot of people are making a lot of money like sexualizing and objectifying women's breasts, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and there's whole industries.
There's a whole industry.
Yeah. Sorry, Kathrin, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think that the best example of just how ridiculous that is the fact that so many breast cancer adverts are based on like sexualizing the breast. And I think that it ends up really kind of like, yeah, like sexualizing the experience of having something like breast cancer, and then it completely trivializes the actual like lived experience of people that are having to go through that. And they're using images on their billboards of like young, attractive or conventionally attractive white women with like big boobs as a selling point, and then it becomes like breast cancer is about having a boob job rather than the actual like nitty-gritty pain of like going through breast cancer. And so they're utilizing these like, yeah, objectified sexualized images as a way to get people to pay, because it's like people can only pay if they can imagine you with like better boobs afterwards. They can't pay just so you can literally not die. And I think it's like such a telling expression of, yeah, it's all about making it like fun and sexy, and yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, and I think that's another interesting kind of thing to look at, because with the breast cancer narrative in women, cis women, there's this whole like process that they have to go through if they get like a double mastectomy or a mastectomy, if like they're still a woman, or if their womanhood has been damaged, or if they're less valuable. And there's so many shows now I've seen where like a woman having scars from that kind of surgery is like a huge plot point. It's like she can't date or get close to anyone because she has these scars, and like she has to eventually reveal them at the end. And then the guy,
oh my god,
like,
really?
I accept you, and it's like we're in love now. And it's like so ridiculous, but it's just funny to me, because then I also watch so much queer media, and like a lot of times top surgery scars are like a point of pride, and people like love showing them off, because for them it's like such a joyous moment. It's a sign that like I had to fight for this and I got it, you know, and I'm happy now. So it's just really interesting too, like when you just contrast queerness in a similar situation, it just highlights like how much the heteropatriarchy is at play. You know, I think for like some people, like Angelina Jolie, you know, that was big news when she got her double mastectomy, and like that was supposed to be this huge moment for women to be like, oh, we can take our health, like we can prioritize our health over like our attractiveness, and that's really empowering. And it's like, yeah, like this shouldn't be, you know, like, you know, if you have scars, I think normalize scars too. Like there's so many aspects of Free the Nip that like, that's a big part of it, is like normalize scars, you know, like if I ever do get the breast reduction that I want, I'm going to have massive scars, like, and that's going to be honestly, like, I will be really proud of them and happy, because I'll be like, this is what it took to like, you know, have a body that I'm comfortable in, and I want to own that as part of the experience, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's this weird idea that we're all supposed to have these like perfect tits that, you know, some people do have naturally, but most of us don't. But we're also not supposed to have scars or any sign that like our body had to go through something to have that.
Yeah.
You know? And it just makes me really sad that someone struggling with cancer and how emotional that must be would also have to process this sense of self-worth and their gender and all of these things
Yes.
in, you know, getting the treatment that they need to like live and and thrive.
Yeah, that's absolutely heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really heartbreaking.
Yeah. And also, just to go back to the point earlier about the breastfeeding and everything like that, I find it really interesting because historically, I think it was a tool of oppression to associate breasts with maternity, because it was a way to relegate women to the kitchen, basically, because it's like, or to domesticity in general, because it's like, if we associate your body and your boobs in particular with breastfeeding, with motherhood, and this is your job now, then that can mean that we can make sure that you don't work, that you stay at home. Because for a long period there was that like babies would be sent away for years if you had enough money to like to have them milked not milked, to have them fed. Oh my god. Yeah, to have them fed by like other women, and then but then it became like, no, as to be a real mother, like a good real mother has to breastfeed their children themselves. And there's so much stigma around cis women who aren't able to breastfeed their children, or who don't want to, or whatever. And I think like it's so interesting to read about how that is so connected to making sure that we don't have an equal seat at the table in terms of like getting jobs and all of that, and like still wanting us to be I don't know, stay at home and part of the domestic house.
Yeah. And you can really see that tension in corporate spaces, because now we've gotten to a point where this does need to be accommodated, right? Like women breastfeeding and also working needs to be accommodated. But we also have professionalism, which is like highly desexualized. But desexualized in a way where it's still like feeding into the heteropatriarchy, right? So it's like you cover up your breasts because breasts are sexual, and this is a not sexual space. So it's like companies and just these environments like do not know what to do with the fact that like people have their titties out and they're like pumping and they're breastfeeding, and then need to be accommodated because it's like that is supposed to be unprofessional, but now they have to accommodate for it. I know we had a breastfeeding room at work, and yeah, it was just someone said in the comments, like, it's like this room you walk by and everyone's like, oh, you know, like, don't look in there, like, what's going on in there? And so I think it's good. I mean, I think we're making progress, but I just think, again, like, professionalism is such a tool of like the oh no.
I woke up the cat. I should have moved. I wanted to get more beer.
But yeah, professionalism is just such a tool of like this heteropatriarchy. And now that they have to kind of start accommodating for some things, it's like nobody knows what to do.
Yeah, it would be like, thinking of that, I'm like, well, it would be really radical then if we had like a genuine free the nip thing where it was just like desexualized and women could just be like, yeah, I'm literally feeding my baby right now. Like, what is the issue? You know, like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, you know?
Yeah.
It's hard though, because it's like, I've even internalized that like my boobs are sexy, and that like, you know, like my partner loves my boobs, right? And like I love my partner playing with my boobs, and I love that my partner loves my boobs, because again, yeah, like I've grown up in a society where like boobs have been really hypersexualized, and I have internalized that like that is like a really sexy part of me. And so it's like, yeah, I do like that, you know, with my partner, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, I think society would be so much more liberated if it was like free the nip and they were like actually desexualized and were just like organs, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and I think you could still have that.
Yeah.
Like, I have very cute feet. I don't know if you guys know this about me. They're very cute.
I have amazing feet as well. I love my feet. Yeah.
Yeah.
With anyone with a foot fetish, call me.
So anytime I've dated someone who's like into feet, they're like, "Oh, your feet," but like I get to walk around with my feet not being sexualized otherwise, you know. So I think like
that's
it could
true.
just be like that, where it's like, you know,
yes,
whatever you're into on someone's body can be sexual when you're being sexual, but then
exactly, and otherwise not. Yeah, exactly. I love that. Like, I love thinking about, because it's like, normalize all of this, and just like normalize treating each other as human beings. Like, normalize like being attracted to people because you're attracted to their being. You know what I mean? And so if you're attracted to someone's being, if they've had, you know, a mastectomy, they have scars, it's like, that doesn't make you unattractive, you know what I mean? But it's because of like, the cis hetero patriarchy. Someone said free the feet. But it's because of patriarchy and capitalism, like commodifying our sexuality, commodifying our bodies, commodifying objectification of like particular body parts, particularly of women. You know, that's why we have that. And then, you know, we've talked in so many other streams about the kind of like sexual trauma that we all have from like being treated like literal sex objects in the bedroom with people, and not actually like having anybody see our humanity, you know? And I feel like, free the nip is like, that could be part of like a broader thing to like stop objectifying the other and like actually form attraction, like sexual attraction based on like some kind of, you know, genuine attraction that you have to that person, you know? I think that would be beautiful. It's just like thinking about how people would express their sexuality in that scenario is like so beautiful to me, you know?
Me too. So. Yeah. And to go back to that question too, I think this may sound somewhat indirect depending on your knowledge of things, but I think like we won't achieve free the nip until we achieve, until we're able to achieve some kind of post-racial, post-cisgender scenario, because I think we always have to remember that like whatever we suffer from as white cis women, which, you know, I adopt when it's convenient for me. So I'll talk about it right now. But like everything that happens to our bodies is a result of racialization, because a white cis woman was a thing that had to be constructed. Yeah. And so these things were constructed to define what a white cis woman was in order to define what it wasn't. Yeah. So yeah, and I think when we talk about these things, like understanding like a trans perspective, understanding BIPOC perspective is really important, because it has so many of these things have roots in racialization for the purpose of oppressing certain people. Yeah. And being able to sort through like who is in the in crowd and who isn't. And like we know, I think it's more common knowledge now that like fat phobia is part of that. And within fat phobia, you do have this idea of what a body's supposed to look like. And originally a white cis woman was supposed to be fairly small breasted, fairly small butt, very thin, very pale. Yeah. So a lot of this stuff that we have comes from the sexual, like the fetishization of other people, and also just the classification of these bodies as not bodies that are allowed to be in power.
Yeah. And then now you have things like, you know, the Kardashian and like, you know, like people,
cannibalism.
Yeah. Like people who are like, you know, people who have white privilege who are then trying to like alter their bodies to have characteristics that are more associated with BIPOC women, but like, you know, and then getting praised for that while BIPOC women are not, or are still marginalized. It's just like, yeah.
And dating Black men and being really fucking gross. They're I think it was from Racism as a Zoological Witchcraft, Afko's book, but she talked about this theory of like whiteness is like this white this cannibalistic, like shamanistic practice. And when I look at the Kardashians, I'm like, that.
Yeah.
Like that's what it is. Like you're almost like literally cannibalizing people.
Yeah.
You're taking from them and you're using it as this way to like stay in power.
Yes.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I think it really intersects with speciesism as well, because it's like the way in which we view like cow's milk to be exploited, to be used the way that we want it to be used, and like their reproductive organs, like them to be raped when they're like artificially inseminated, like the way that we use these like use and abuse these like animal bodies. And I guess for this conversation specifically like the breasts, that I don't know, it directly like feeds into the way in which we exploit human breasts and vice versa. So yeah.
Yeah, read The Sexual Politics of Meat if you haven't already. It's foundational work. Yeah, and like even how we sexualize in advertising, like a chicken breast or a chicken leg.
Yeah.
So gross and weird. But it goes back to that cannibalistic practice that white supremacy is, and under white supremacy, including speciesism, is that, you know, it's not enough to just consume these animals and make them commodities, but we have to also like sexualize the process of that somehow. And sexualize like the animal and break them into parts and then like fetishize those parts.
Yeah. Everett also says sexualized breast permits colonial sexual conquest onto societies where women have their breasts out. Yeah, my partner, I think Nikki put it in the show notes, but my partner sent me this thing on Facebook of like reconstruction of the clothes of women from the Minoan era in Crete. And it's like these beautiful, beautiful garments. You can check them out. But the breasts are always exposed. Like the breasts are always out, you know?
And that used to be the norm, and it wasn't. I think people might know that, but then they picture that it was just this like sexualized, you know, like Garden of Sin kind of thing. And it's like, no, people just had their tits out. It really wasn't a big deal.
Well, like people will watch stuff that is like you know, looking at some expose of like, oh, we're gonna visit this, you know, tribe and wherever, and the women will have their tits out and they'll be like chopping wood and whatever, and it's just like, oh yeah, it's like, oh okay, yeah, they're just doing that.
They're
like
just
that's
living
fine,
their life.
right?
Yeah.
And yet somehow in this like Western context, that's just, you know, super sexualized.
Yeah. Koch said, how hilarious would it be if we were allowed to casually get our boobs out in corporate setting? If I was just like, thump, thump, listen, Tom.
Yeah.
It's like a power move. Like I just Oh my god.
Nicole, I'm just distracted. Like I have this whole business plan in mind that we're going to start our own foot OnlyFans webpage. I've just been like,
girl, I'm desperate, so I'll do it.
We would make so much money, honestly. We have this. I'll send you a picture of my feet afterwards, and you can send me yours, and we can go from there.
That's how it'll all start. We've gotten so many good comments. I don't know how to say that. I'm sorry. The advertisements for breast cancer are fucked up, and they ignore that breast cancer affects men too. Yes, I've actually seen a couple TV shows that I've watched have. There's one in particular called A Million Little Things, I think, where one of the main characters is a man who has breast cancer, and his cancer comes back. That's not spoilers. It's like in the first 3 seconds of the show. But I was like, oh yeah, like I've never really heard anyone talk about this. And I think it's really interesting that, again, it's something that has become feminized to have breast cancer. So men who have it are like humiliated and feel like they can't talk about it. And it even shows this guy going to a support group, and one of the women who is new to the group is like, she's trying to introduce herself, but she's like staring at him, and finally she's like, I'm sorry, why are you here? You know, and he's like, I have breast cancer. Like, I'm here because I need support as well. And And I think that that's just, I just think it's gross the way that we really gender these conditions, and then it's like supposed to be embarrassing for someone to go through something like this, and not have access to the support they need.
Absolutely.
Hollow coffin. My mom had breast cancer and had a mastectomy. She survived, but she deals with a lot of people gawking at her because she decided not to get reconstruction. Yeah, and I feel like that's a decision that a lot of people make, and then it's seen as like really weird. And it's like, but why? You know, like if there's a lot of reasons, I think, to decide to not get reconstructive surgery, and that's a personal choice. It shouldn't be weird.
Yeah, especially how expensive it probably is.
Yeah. I also love this comment. I've always been, this is also Hollow Coffin. I've always been ashamed of my chest. Is it too big or too small? Being non-binary is confusing sometimes. I feel this in my bones. I'm always like, what is my body doing and how do I feel about it? I never know. And yes, salami mommy, free the feet. Let's do it.
I also was reading today, which I thought was so interesting, about this shift from the clitoris to boobs. I'll just read it out because I think it's super interesting. And it said that I think this was in the 18th century, the breast replaced the clitoris as a new indicator of woman's proper nature. Interestingly, the breast arouses desire in the men who glimpse it, not in the woman, whereas the clitoris is linked to the woman's own desire and pleasure. The shift from clitoris to breast as a focus for the society's gaze makes sense, as the ascendant culture of domesticity required the denial of the very existence. And then I didn't write the rest down. But I think it was something about the very existence of women's pleasure. And I think that's so interesting because it's so true. It's like, why would it shift from clitoris to boob? Because the clitoris is something that is like very pleasurable to us, but the boob isn't pleasurable for us. It exists for I guess it can be pleasurable. It can be. But for the most part, like, that shift is super interesting. Yeah, and then now with the clitoris, it's kind of like, oh no, that's like unattractive. That's not I don't want to go near that. I don't want to touch it. Like only with like my penis inside the vagina. And it's like really interesting how that doesn't really match up with what is most pleasurable for us. So I just thought that was super interesting.
Yeah, that is really interesting. So I have like a downer story to tell. Are we ready to?
Oh yeah.
To be depressed?
I need to go get more wine.
So the last thing there's a few other things I had written down that I want to talk about, but yeah, I guess like speaking of sexualization and like breasts being over sexualized and like women being objectified, even in leftist spaces, I feel like this is like partly, my latest video kind of touches upon like the need for leftist men to divest from the shit, and to do some work on their own objectification of women, their own internalized misogyny. So yeah, I wanted to share a story that happened to me. I mean, first of all, this was like part of like me leaving Twitter and like realizing that it was just like a very male dominated space, was that like, and like no shame to anyone, like, there's a lot of people who are posting like thirst trap photos on Twitter, right? And like very boob oriented. I'm not going to name any names. And like, I really don't, it's like, again, power to you. Like I'm really not concerned with like people who are posting. What concerned me though was then like just seeing all of our male comrades like commenting so lewdly and like this like really, sexual kind of like aggressive way. And I'm like, okay, is this what we're doing now? Like our male comrades are just like allowed to just comment on our bodies and like our body parts and whatever. Cause I'm like, I already get enough of that on my YouTube channel, even when I'm like completely covered up and completely like talking about politics and nothing to do with like my looks or my body. So something that happened to me was that apparently some dude found, I mean, my Instagram was public for a while. I'm pretty sure it still is. Looked at my Instagram, and if you know me or have watched my content, you know that I had a very serious eating disorder for a long time. So like I said, when I was really young, I developed like really big boobs really early. But then I had this really, devastating eating disorder for about 10 years. So I obviously really slimmed down. And when your whole body slimmed down, like my boobs appeared smaller, like they were still, compared to my now completely, slim and anorexic body, my boobs were still big. But they were obviously very small. And then a chronic illness struck, thyroid issues struck. And, here I am. And like, these are my boobs now. And so apparently there's this subreddit. I mean, there's a whole bunch of subreddits of just like people posting photos of like women's body parts, like very specific body parts or whatever. But there's the subreddit of, people posting photos of women who apparently their breasts had grown like later in life. And this is supposed to be like some scandalous thing that like, oh my goodness, like usually women's breasts grow during puberty, but like these women, their breasts grew later in life. And like, whoa, how sexy is that? So
they had doing that with dicks. And being
can you imagine that?
Because first of all, dad dick is a thing. My friends always used to joke that like every dad has a big dick because like dad dick is a thing. It was just a joke, but it was very funny just to picture like once you had a baby, all of a sudden your dick got huge. Because you're a dad. But like, can you imagine us doing that with like something like that where it's like, oh, this like 50-year-old dick is like bigger than when it was 15, and it's like
whoa, and then like all these women being like, whoa dude, look at this dick, like like I always think about that. I'm like, this is such a gendered phenomenon, and it's like I don't think people realize that. People are just like, well, like of course men want to look at like women's breasts, and it's just like, but like it's so anyway, it's so objectifying, it's so dehumanizing, and like if it wouldn't be the same if it happened, like if the genders were reversed, then like we should probably consider that. Okay. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So anyway, there's the subreddit. They had taken photos of me with like my eating disorder, and then me now with like my bigger breasts, and these dudes were commenting on it. So someone who I guess knew me, and people like knew who it was. People were like, oh, it's Mexie. She makes leftist videos and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, holy shit. So this guy let me know like, hey, you should like, just so you know, like, this, your photos are up on this thing. So I went and like reported it, and I was like, you idiots. Like I had an eating disorder and now I'm bigger. Like this is not a scandalous thing. But anyway, it was like really upsetting at the time. And, I was grateful for this guy who had come forward and told me that this was happening. But I was also like, what are you doing on this site? Like, like you're sitting there spending your day scrolling through subreddits of like women's body parts that men are posting and commenting on. And I'm just really like, it just made me feel like, okay, no, like I'm really honestly like drawing a line here. And that was me in my last video as well. Like if you're a John, if you're someone who is not working on your own internalized misogyny and your own objectification of women, then like you're not a comrade of mine. Like you don't feel like a safe person to be around. I don't feel like you're fighting to end the same systems of oppression that I'm fighting to end. And like you're not actually willing to interrogate or like give up your own power and entitlement and privilege that you get under these systems that are extremely misogynist, extremely objectifying. And, anyway, it was just definitely an interesting experience. I'll say that. But it was just like, I didn't even know how to take that. Cause I was like, thank you for telling me. Because it's like, okay, you'll sit here and you'll scroll these photos and whatever, and you'll comment and you'll tell the women that hey, by the way, your stuff's up here. But I'm like, all these other women are just fair game, Like, fuck, it's man, like, I'm just over it. I'm just not.
That happens so much. Like, as long as I don't know you, then I can objectify you. But if I know you, then all of a sudden I am aware that this is wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then also I'm going to keep doing it.
Exactly.
And it's like, it's just that old trope of like, we shouldn't have to be like your mother or your sister or your daughter for you to like see us as people. Like that, we should not have to have a relationship to you in order to be people.
Yeah. But like men are conditioned so young into this, right? And like, you know, like and I've been like learning more about like how like the porn industry, especially now that it's like super big business, like the ways that it'll like target children, like it really tries to bring in people as young as possible so that they'll get hooked and then like, you know, like whatever. So it's like they're conditioned from a very young age to, completely objectify women's body parts, to see them in a very dehumanized way. And like, here it is.
And it's dangerous because you're getting that exposure before you've even had a direct relationship. So like you're literally going into that dynamic with that kind of conditioning.
I remember that. I think I've told you both this before, but I started watching porn when I was 18, and I'd never watched porn before that. And I remember just like it was so like crazy to see how just within a few months, like how the shift of the lens through which I was viewing other women like completely shifted. Like because prior to that I'd never watched porn, but like just those few months I just started to really kind of dehumanize women and like really base them on their appearance and on like just like not really see them as human as much anymore. And it was like I really had to kind of look internally and be like, damn, like this is unbelievable that I've changed this much in just a few months' time, and like how I'm viewing I really hate the way that I'm viewing these people, and then imagining what they're like during sex and all of this stuff and naked. And I was like, if this is happening to me at 18 within a few months, like what is this doing to the majority of the population who starts watching this like 12, 13, 14, who don't even have like the faculties really to recognize, to be able to understand what is happening. And I'm someone that's like socialized as a woman, so you'd think that even for me it would be less stark than or like less objectification, less dehumanization than all these other people. So it's just it's unbelievable to think about the impact. Like we don't actually have the studies, I think, or the knowledge to really understand what this is doing to us. So
but just a call for like leftist men. You know what I mean? I'm just kind of like drawing a line in the sand where I'm just like, I'm not doing this. Is like partly why I left Twitter, because I'm like, it's a very male dominated space. Like it's very common for men to like comment lewdly and sexually on like their women comrades like photos and all this other stuff, and like talk about like simping and all this stuff. And I'm like, I don't know, like in real life, like in leftist movements in real life, there's enough issues with like abuse and like sexual abuse and trauma and things like that I'm like, I'm just done with like misogyny in any way. Like I'm over it.
And I think like men often need to take a hard look at who they're supporting and why, because a lot of times it is their support depends on their attraction to that person. I've had that happen to me so many times where I've become aware that someone was only supporting me. I don't want to say only, like they may have also agreed with what I was saying, but that they were putting effort into supporting me because they were attracted to me. And then that sets up a really bad dynamic where you're kind of forcing me to either like placate you in some way or to like reject that and stand up for myself and then lose that support. And we shouldn't be doing that to our comrades. Like,
no,
even for me, you know, I'm queer as fuck and I like have crush. I'm pansexual trash to paraphrase Melina Pendulum. And like so I find a lot of leftists like women, people really attractive, and I make an effort to like not put that forward in how I, present their work, how I talk about them. If I'm referring people to their work, I'm not like, oh my God, and they're so hot too. Like I try really hard to like And part of me, it feels like it would be empowering because I'm queer to like assert my queerness in that way. But then I realized I'm like, but that's not okay for them. Like they're still being objectified. It's not empowering for them. So like I'm careful about, you know, I may have crushes on some people that I talk about or recommend, but I don't want that to be part of the way that I'm representing them. I don't want to invite other people to objectify them just because I think they're cute, you know? And I think we can all do that work, but I think, yeah, men have to really think about that. Like, am I promoting this person? Am I talking about them in these ways just because I think they're attractive? Am I even really listening to what they're saying? Because I feel like a lot of times when men have a crush, they don't even really hear you or engage with you critically. And it's like, I would rather you disagree with me and actually hear what the fuck I'm saying than agree with me point blank just because you think I'm cute, you know?
Yeah, I'm actually honestly going to make like, I'm going to compile all of the comments that I get that are either misogynist comments or that are like very, very sexual or focused on my appearance and like make some kind of art piece from them. Because I'll get two different comments around that kind of theme. So I'll get people commenting that they either like don't listen, like they'll turn the sound off on the video, but like watch me just to like see me because they think I'm hot.
What?
Or I'll get comments that are like
so uncomfortable.
Yeah. Or I'll get comments that they're like, I listen to your videos, but I'd never watch them because I find you so distracting because you're so beautiful or whatever. And I'm like, neither of these are great. You know, I want to like compile all these comments and then just make some kind of like, I don't know what, but like some kind of like visual art from this.
Well, I support
I'm so
that.
disturbed. I'm so disturbed.
Yeah.
Yeah,
oh my
that's
God.
really disturbing. Yeah, and then when I shaved my head, I got the vitriol of the internet being like, "You're not appealing to the male gaze," and it's like, "Yeah, I'm not.
Yeah.
Sorry, you have to just listen to what I'm saying now."
Yeah,
I know that's really infuriating for you.
Well, so many men will just be like, "Well, fuck it, I'm not going to listen to you," you know?
Yeah, and I'm like, good. That's literally the environment I'm trying to create.
Yeah.
Be yourself out there. Thank you.
Yeah.
I remember when I posted my video on veganism, someone commented like, oh, you know, if you ate meat, your boobs would grow. And I think that there's like...
Which maybe is true, but like, why?
Yeah, and I don't know, it just seems like... Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what to say.
Probably more if you drink milk, maybe your boobs will get bigger from that.
Yeah.
That's a whole, oh my God, that's a whole thing. Because I was I was a big part of the local vegan scene for a few years. And I remember talking to this one woman in particular, but I think this was like kind of a common viewpoint, that she was telling me that she was going to, even though she and her husband were vegan, she was going to feed her kid animal products because she wanted him to be taller so that he would have more advantages in life. And I was like,
okay,
that's really interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like, Kathrin, it kind of goes back to what you were saying before. Like there's something there to where like even people who know better would use animal products in this way to like advance their own, like sexual dominance or like advantages in life. I don't know.
Yeah, it reminds me of this couple that I know with a boy and a girl, and it's like children, and they're like, oh yeah, with the boy, we're like, with the girl, she's being raised vegan/vegetarian, but with the boy, he's being given meat. And I was like,
yeah,
like, wait, one, that sounds so annoying and complicated to cook, but secondly, like, it's like it really feeds into this politics of meat, like, oh, if you're a man you have to have meat, but if you're a woman, you don't want to get fat, don't have a meat, eat a vegan diet, eat some salad and you'll stay thin. And like it's just yeah, I don't know, I can't.
That's like actually really upsetting because like I'm thinking about those poor children, like that poor woman growing up in that environment.
Yeah.
Like that's like actually really
and
traumatizing.
Knowing that like she is different.
Oh God.
Yeah. Well, and that reminds me, Mexie, of the episode you and Maureen did about, like, if women were as strong as men or something, like, I forget the exact title, but how you talked about, like, women being smaller and shorter is almost, I don't know if it's proven, but, like, the theory is that it's because of calorie restriction for so long.
I mean,
or like less access to calories.
Well, I mean, like, sexual dimorphism is a thing, right? Mm-hmm. So, like, yes, there are biological reasons that women would be like smaller or shorter or whatever, but that, like, overall, like, it's really exacerbated culturally because, yeah, in so many cultures, you know, like, the children and the men will eat first, and, like, the woman will eat like whatever's left over, and she does all the cooking and whatever, and you know, in our society that really, like, sexualizes smaller bodies, right? And, like, has these expectations for women to fit into. Like, women are always, like, I mean, men have eating disorders too, but, like, women predominantly have eating disorders and, like, are trying to be real thin, even though that, like, you know, like, if women were as physically strong as men, like, would patriarchy really be a thing? Like, like, I feel like historically part of the reason why, you know, patriarchy survived and thrived is because, like, if women didn't go along with something, like, you know, men would just beat them up, right? Like, if you have a monopoly on violence, then you're able to basically assert your way no matter what anyone else says, right? And, like, yeah, so it's interesting stuff. Yeah.
Well, and that was part of the construction of a white woman, was specifically, again, that's where fat phobia came out of, because it was seen as this, like, I think it had, like, puritanical roots, at least in the US, of, yeah, like, women don't eat much and they stay really small and they just don't have needs, right? Mm-hmm. They don't have sexual desires. They don't have, hunger. They don't, you know, they're supposed to just be kind of these pure self-sustaining vessels to be filled with God's light and semen.
I was gonna say, like, mostly semen.
It's just it's wild to think about. It's wild to think about, because I always felt that I was supposed to be, this is just pure speculation, but I always felt like I was supposed to be taller. But I started having my restrictive eating right when I was growing. And I just always kind of wonder if I would have been taller if I hadn't been restricting so heavily during that, like, really key time in my life. Not that I'm super short and not, you know, I'm fine with my height, but it's just something I think about. Like, if I had been feeding myself properly and taking care of myself, like, would I be different? You know, would my body be different? Because I feel like I'm at least 5'10", but that is not the reality. I'm like, I have tall energy, but I'm not tall. And I just kind of wonder about stuff like that, like how many of us, because so many of us do develop these eating disorders right around that time when you're growing and your body's changing. And
I always had that thought about my boobs as well. I was like, if I'd eaten more when I was younger, if I hadn't have been restrictive, would my boobs be bigger? Would I have grown more? Would I have, like, hormonally, I don't know, maybe that was stunted because of, like, restrictive eating, but I don't know.
It's like, I want to be 6 foot tall and have all the boys afraid of me.
I don't know.
I also think there's something interesting. I don't know if anyone in the comments can relate, but the way in which hair, like, on our heads, like, intersects with boobs, because I know that so much of the reason why I have super long hair is 100% because of my small boobs, because it's always a way for me to, like, be able to cover up my boobs if I'm self-conscious, or feel like I'm overcompensating in terms of femininity because I don't feel feminine in terms of my boobs. And it really is, and especially during sex, it's definitely a way for me to, like, cover them up as a way, because I'd be self-conscious. The first few men that I slept with, I'd always apologize to them because of my boobs. It was, like, so sad. I was like, I'm really sorry, I don't have any boobs.
You should be like tiny titties. I want to see it. If I had boobs your size, I would be so fucking obnoxious. I would be walking. I would do every live stream in pasties. I would be like out here leaning out of my window being like, do you see these?
Yeah.
It's hard. It's like, I remember having that insecurity back before they came in, and it's like, it's hard. Yeah. It's a real pressure.
Yeah, I dated one guy who would just play with his own boobs instead of mine because his boobs were bigger than my boobs. And I was like, that can't have made him feel good, and it definitely didn't make me feel good. So I was like, yeah. But yeah, I'm really interested by like hair and boobs, and like also I have really hairy nipples. I feel like this is also a thing that needs to be normalized.
Yes. I remember you saying that before on a voice note, and I think I forgot to say, but me too. Like, I have to pluck them all the time.
Me too.
And it's one of those things, it's like my chin hair as well, which is just getting more and more aggressive the older I get. But it's like, I swear to God, I thought I look at them every day, but then suddenly there's one that's just like super long, and I'm like, where did that come from? Like, do these grow overnight? I don't understand.
I know. My nipple hair came from the fact that like I literally used to shave every inch of my body.
No.
I know. What? My back, my nipples, my
How would you
like
shave your
neck.
back?
I don't know. I don't know.
Get back there.
Do you even have hair, or was it just like the like peach fuzz?
No, I didn't have any hair at all. I didn't have any hair, but like but yeah, once you shave, then it like grows back worse. I mean, apparently that's been disproven, but on my body it's definitely not disproven. Definitely when I shave, it grows back worse. But yeah, anyway, I think I started shaving like my whole body when I was 12, but I do regret that so much because obviously then everything grows back so much worse now. And yeah, now there's so much plucking involved. It's so annoying. And then every time I pluck my hair, it also kind of arouses me because like my nipples are so sensitive. So then it's so annoying. Then I'm like, oh no, now I've got to masturbate. It's like so annoying. It takes
like
up so much of my day.
It's a whole day.
So annoying.
Oh my God, Kathrin, I love you so much.
I love you both too.
Yeah, that's really, I don't know. Yeah, the nipple hair is just a whole thing. And I feel like I think being disabled, I'm just so tired of all the work that is supposed to go into having this kind of body. Because it's like, oh, I can't let someone see that I have nipple hair. You know what I mean? That would just be seen as like disgusting. And I'm just like not taking care of myself. And like, what am I, this dirty person? And it's like, you know what? Yeah, I am. I'm fucking tired. My nipple hair grows an inch a night, apparently. And like, it gets ahead of me sometimes. And yeah, like, honestly, who fucking cares?
Yeah, honestly, if we freed the nip, then it would just be like normalized. It's like, oh, some boobs have hair. Like some, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, oh, there you go, you know?
And I'm just so happy that my mom used to talk about that because she would always be like plucking her nipples and she'd be like, you just wait, this is going to be you someday. And I was like, no, it's not. And now I've been cursed with these genetically hairy boobs.
I'm like super lucky in that regard. Like I'll have to pluck like once, like very, you know, not that much, but there's like so many things that it's like Kathrin, I know that you've been like made fun of for your boobs and whatever, and you have a lot of insecurity or whatever. But like, I always look at people with small boobs and I'm like, oh, that's so amazing. Like you can just not wear a bra, you know?
Yes.
Cause for me, like like trying to like run or something like that, like I have to just like strap them down because otherwise it's just like, like it's impossible. It's impossible to like do physical activity. But also like, you know, like I hate bras, I hate underwire, I hate wearing them. But whenever I go out and I'm not wearing a bra, I'm incredibly self-conscious because like they're moving around so much, and I can tell that people are like, whoa. And I can tell that like people think that it's rude. Like people think that it's rude of me to be doing that, especially if it's like a family and their children are there. Like I can tell that they're like upset because they feel like it's rude that like my boobs are like, you know, not in a bra, even though I'm like, fuck bras. Like we need to burn bras. But I always feel like I need to put a bra on to be like respectful to people. Cause otherwise it's like, it's too, I don't know, you know, provocative to wear one.
It's really annoying. And again, it just goes back to the sexualization of breasts and how oppressive and confining that is, because I can just not wear a bra for my own comfort, and it has nothing to do with anyone else. And I can go out dressed, you know, like in a sweatshirt and sweatpants. Like clearly I'm not like trying to turn anyone on or, you know, do anything like that. But yeah, it's still seen as this like very sexualized thing. And it's like, I'm just trying to buy some almond milk. That is it. I don't want to deal with any of this. It's just like, ugh, it's so frustrating.
Koch has normalized loose jiggly titties. Yes, thank you.
That's like I was interested in the no bra movement. A few years ago, I think, is when it was kind of really taking off. And so I was watching some videos about it. And it was just so funny. There was this girl who made a video and she was like 20, if a day, you know, and she was just like, yeah, when I'm out, I just like, if someone's staring at my titties, I'm like, yeah, these are my titties. she's like, I just think it's fun. Like and I'm like, bless the youth, you know, it's like, I want to be in that place where I'm just shaking my titties at people and being like, yeah, these are my titties. Like, what are you looking at? But I just like, I'm with you, Mexie. It's hard sometimes when it's like, I'm just at the grocery store and I don't want to be like scandalizing a family. You know? It's hard. Even though I know like they shouldn't be scandalized, but it's like I'm out here. I'm not here to make a political statement right now. I'm just trying to like do what I need to do.
It's the same when I like if I go to a beach and I decide to go topless or whatever. It's like I need to like close my eyes and just like tan because like if I don't, then I'll feel guilty. Like I'll feel like, oh my God, yeah, I'm scandalizing these families. Like people are like upset with me. You know, men are like freaking out, you know, so it's like, it's just not worth it.
I even feel that way. I hate tan lines so much on me. I don't care about them on other people, but like, I don't know why. I just absolutely hate them. So I usually tan with like like when I lay on my stomach, I'll take off my top essentially. And even that, I feel like people are like weird about it. And I'm always like so self-conscious. So I have to do the same thing. I have to just like put my head down and just close my eyes and put music in and just be like, whatever. I'm here by myself. It's been my greatest dream in life to just have somewhere where I can like tan topless and just be and not have to worry about anyone. I always do that when I travel because I feel like Europe is like way ahead of us with that. Like they're just way ahead of us. I remember my family and I were in Greece like ages ago and we were like having dinner on the beach and we all just like looked up and there was this man, like this old man. He was like, he was older. He wasn't fit at all. He's running on the beach. completely nude. So like his junk is going, like his body is going, and he's just like whatever. We're just like eating dinner, like okay, there we go, you know. And it was beautiful, and like like there were grandmas like with their completely naked, like with their children or whatever. So like. Yeah, I love traveling to certain places where people are just like, whatever, here's my body, and then just being nude there because it's like, oh, it's amazing. But like, I feel like in North America, it's just not like that at all.
Yeah, I'm living here in Spain now, and when I go to the beach, it's unbelievable. It's like 50% of the people with boobs are like completely have their boobs out, lying down, and it's completely not seen as a big deal at all. And my friend was telling me as well that. She with her family, they all walk around naked in front of each other. I was like, oh my God, you're naked in front of your dad. Your dad is naked in front of you. And she's like, yeah, so what's the big deal? And I think, it completely is a totally different thing. And I think because I grew up in Austria for a while, I do think it really helped me to be more comfortable with my body in some ways because I just was so used to seeing so many different naked bodies that it just helped me to feel less shame about mine. Whereas I think if you never see other bodies, then you just assume they all look like the picture perfect thing and you're the one abnormal person. But I grew up seeing so many different bodies, so I was like, oh, okay, my vagina isn't as ugly as I thought it was. Everyone has these vaginas. Like boobs is the same. And I agree.
Yeah, because if you never see it, then like you're only going off like what you see in Hollywood, what you see in porn, what you see in like when advertising. So you're literally only seeing like supermodels and like super highly objectified and dehumanizing images of people's bodies. So like of course you're gonna have but it like that just feeds capitalism, right? Like then you just have to buy all this shit. Then you have to, like you did, like work your nights and weekends for £350 an hour just to try to save up for a boob job. Like that's what they fucking want, you know?
Yeah, and also bras are so expensive.
They're so expensive.
Also, it's really interesting everything that you were saying about going outside with boobs, because like, yeah, I 100% acknowledge it's such a privilege in so many ways to have small boobs. Like running completely fine. I like literally never wear a bra. Like 99% of the time, and like sleeping on my front, like I don't know, in terms of comfort and no back pain, and like yeah, so I 100% agree that it's like, yeah, definitely a lot easier in so many ways. But I was also thinking it's interesting because when I go out without a bra, and like often you can see my nipples because they're always erect. They just have a world of their own. They're always erect, and I don't have that experience at all that you're talking about of feeling like it's scandalous. If anything, I'm always feeling like really sexy if my nipples are there, even if I'm wearing a t-shirt and it's super obvious. It's sort of seen as, I feel like it's seen as like, oh, this is really attractive, or yeah, kind of, I feel really good in that. But I think that's because they're small enough for it not to be seen as this completely like vulgar. Yeah, I don't know, it's almost seen as like you're attention seeking if your boobs are really big, and like, oh, you're just wanting everyone to look at you. And
exactly,
whereas if your boobs are really small and it's only like you know, there's little nipples sticking out, it's like, oh, this is like delicate and sweet, and
it's cute.
Like, yeah,
it's like, oh yeah, like of course, of course, that makes sense.
Well, and I think it makes sense. Yeah, I think people probably perceive it too as like, oh yeah, you're not wearing a bra because you have small boobs, and so we might see your nipples. Whereas like someone with our size boobs, it's like expected that we will wear a bra. So we're supposed to like, so you're not supposed to see our nipples. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. But you're not supposed to see us like jiggling around, you know? You're not supposed to see it like blah, 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 blah.
Cocked in,
yeah, exactly.
Held up.
Yeah. It is seen as like very vulgar.
Yeah. And then I think we kind of touched on this earlier, but it also just really contributes to rape culture. It's like, oh, well, she has massive boobs, or she's showing her boobs, or she's not wearing a bra. What did she think would happen? Of course she would expect to be assaulted. Of course she'd expect to get harassed. Like, what did she expect? It's like, I think people with big boobs, especially, even if you're wearing a bra, even if you're doing everything to be as like modest as possible, you're still going to be like, oh, well, you know, what do you expect? You have massive boobs. Like,
Yeah, I've had so many men in a professional setting talk to my boobs. Like, literally cannot look me in the eye. They're just like stare at my chest, and I'm like, bro. like
bye.
You're literally like at my desk at work, and you can't reel this in. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. It's like they don't even have to be showing. It's just the fact that they exist that men are like. And like my sad story is that after the guy who sexually assaulted me 2 years ago, when he was done, he was like, you know, the things you have going for you are your eyes and your boobs. And I was like, cool.
Fuck you, man.
Yeah, I was like, wow. So I just had this horrible sexual experience, and then you're also devaluing me. Like after you saw my naked body, that's what you had to say was like, you know, the things you have going for you, your eyes and your boobs. It's like,
well, you got shit going for you, dude. You're a piece of shit. You got nothing.
You're a miserable,
fuck you,
soulless human. Yeah.
Yeah, and you. Anyway.
Yeah. Save it for the after party.
Yeah. Let me just go off against this guy.
So, speaking of which, Mexie, I know you've been on screen for a while. Did you? Yeah. Do we have anything else to say in the main episode?
I wanted to talk about plastic surgery a bit, but I don't have that much to say. Oh yeah, I was okay. I'll talk about it.
Go for it.
Sorry, I thought. sorry. I've had 2 beers and it's just ridiculous. But yeah, I guess just with the plastic surgery thing, I just think it's so interesting how, and obviously I think like there's distinctions between surgery that you get or that you may get if you're trans, and like the kind of cosmetic surgery, and also like surgery if you have like breast cancer and all of that. But I think it's so interesting how the talk about breast surgery is now really hyper focused on like it's an empowering feminist act that I'm doing because I love myself and this is my expression of my love for myself, and I'm just doing it because I want to, and like no one pressured me to do it and stuff like that. And I don't in any way want to ridicule people who have that surgery. Like I said, I was considering it for a very long time, and I think like we shouldn't ever criticize people for having it. But at the same time, it does frustrate me when it is painted as this like empowerment act, and as if, and even if it's not painted as an empowerment act, to act as if it's completely divorced from the systemic issues frustrates me, because it's like you may feel as if it's completely your own choice, but it's just not. It's just not.
Nothing is our own choice. Like,
yeah, and it's difficult because you don't want to invalidate someone's experience and be like, no, you're wrong. But at the same time, it's like, why would we spend thousands to like physically cut into our bodies, change this, if it was just purely for ourselves? Like, of course it's like impacted by the society around us, by patriarchy, by beauty standards, etc., etc. Yes, anyway, it just frustrates me, but yeah,
like there's nothing in that, like especially when we think about breasts as like mammary glands that are meant to like feed children, that's like their literal purpose. Like there's nothing in getting something like that done that is like just purely for yourself. Like it doesn't enhance anything to do with like your health, your physical capacity, anything. It just enhances, or it like makes society around you look at you in a different way based on like the male gaze and what the male gaze expects you to be. Like it allows you to conform more readily to the male gaze so that you are treated differently in society, right? And so you're just like, yeah, I'm doing this for me. It frustrates me too, because it's like, you know, like, because there's, you know, fillers and Botox and all that stuff is like really normalized as well. And it's kind of like the same narrative. And I actually got Botox done. It's something that I'm going to talk about in a video. I know like for Harriet did. And yeah, I mean, I was really embarrassed when that happened because I felt like I couldn't like emote from my eyes anymore. And I was just like humiliated that I had done something like this. And like, yeah, I just feel like there's just no way like, of course you're going to like rationalize that to yourself and be like, oh, I did this for myself, like literally for myself. And I feel like there's a number of like things that could be like fully for yourself, right? Like, you know, Nick, like you were saying in terms of like your gender expression and wanting to reduce and whatever, like that is something that is like more genuinely like, you know.
Well, and it would take me away from the male gaze.
It would,
so it's kind of, not that it has to do that in order to be empowering, but it's like, obviously it's going to make my life harder in certain ways.
Yeah.
And so it is for me, because I'm saying like, I don't want to be, I'm doing this despite the fact that I'll lose social capital, I guess is my point.
Exactly. Yeah. Like doing something that is going to gain you social capital, because you want that social capital is like, I'm sorry, like never divorced from the broader systems that we're socialized under. And it's like, I just feel like, talking about making choices for ourselves when like we form our own identities based around our interactions with others and how others are reading us, it's like, it doesn't make sense, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I mean, that kind of applies, I think, in the trans spaces as well, because you can get things that are gender affirming, of course, but there's also discourse and questions about, would you feel that you needed this to affirm your gender if we didn't have these cishet standards and definitions of gender in the first place? And I don't know who has watched the Euphoria, the Jules special episode after, but just for whoever's seen it, like I was just really excited to see that kind of enter the mainstream discourse, where you have a a trans girl who's in high school who, you know, has gone on the hormone blockers and, or whatever it's called. I forget what they're called. But anyway, she was saying, like, I didn't want to hit puberty because I was thinking these things like thickness and deepness, which would be part of my adolescence, would be not beautiful, or they wouldn't be part of my identity as a woman. But now I think, like, why not embrace those qualities? And she talked about perhaps going off the hormone blockers and just letting herself, you know, grow and change as she's going to grow and change, and just seeing that all is part of her femininity. And it's the same thing where it's like, I would never want to police someone who wants gender affirming surgery, or wants to do anything. But it is an interesting question of how many of us would feel that we needed these things if we were living in this kind of post-gender society where we wouldn't be misgendered walking out the door because of our body parts or because of, you know, anything. Like, we would all be able to just be who we are and be accepted for that. And yeah, I really liked the work that For Harriet has done around this topic, because she has gotten certain things done, and like currently, and she's very open about it. And she, you know, says that like this isn't empowering. This is part, like, I know where this is coming from, but also, like,
we're all trying to survive out here.
Exactly.
I love that, because she's like, yeah, this is a contradiction. Like, I make videos all the time about how beauty is a bad investment, and here I am investing in like Botox and filler and whatever. But at the same time, like, we're like, we're living in a society that treats women like shit, especially women like over the age of 30, like as you're aging and all this other stuff, like, you get treated like fucking shit. So it's like, no wonder that people want to get all of these things done, especially now that they're being so normalized, right? Because then the more that it becomes normalized, the more that you stand out if you're somebody who doesn't have them. Because then you look like, what's wrong with you? Like, you look like haggard and you look horrible and whatever, because you're being compared to all these people who have gotten these procedures done, right? And so anyway, I hope what I said before wasn't like, you know, I obviously would not shame anyone for getting any procedures. Like I said, like, I got Botox and whatever. Like, I'm not going to shame anyone for getting any kind of procedure done. But I agree, Kathrin, that like, there's no need to frame this as any kind of sort of empowerment or like a feminist act or whatever. Like, that's just choice feminism. And like, no, like, we need to smash the conditions that make people feel like they need to, because it's like, that's the thing with choice feminism. It's just like, well, in our society, a lot of times it's not a choice. Like, if you're an aging woman who's not getting Botox and filler, then you are treated like literal crap. So like, is it really a choice? You know, like, we need, if it was a society where, like, you know, you wouldn't get any social capital for having a boob job, or you wouldn't get any social capital for getting Botox or fillers, then it would be a literal choice. But because you do, it's not like a fully free choice, you know, and it can't be, you know?
Yeah. There's always that context there.
Yeah.
I also watched some videos by the Stitches, I think is her name. And she's a very young person who's gotten fillers, and she got a boob job. And she makes really cool videos where she just like talks about these things like very bluntly, which I really appreciate. And she had one video like why I stopped getting fillers, and I was like, oh, let me see what's up, you know? And what was really interesting is she also ended up talking about this in her boob job video, is that she said, when you get this stuff done, there's swelling. So like, she got like her lips done, and she's like, there's swelling. So when you first see yourself, it's bigger than what it's going to be. And so she, like, by the time it goes down, even though it is bigger than like what, or better than it was before, you now have it in your head of what it looked like post surgery. And so you're always trying to get to that. And she's like, so it gets like addictive. Like, every time you get it done, you're always feeling let down after, once you heal, because it's never at that, like, that height that it was when the swelling was still there. And she said that with her boob job too, that like, she got a lift. So I don't think she didn't get implants or anything, I think, but she got like a lift. And she said when they were swollen, it was like they were lifted and they were a bit bigger. And she's like, they were amazing. And then when the swelling went down, she was like, oh, you know, and she's like, and if I look at pictures, like they're objectively like more where I wanted them to be than they were before. But like now I have that post-surgery like idea in my head. And I think that's part of, I don't know, I just think that's interesting too. It's like almost the process of trying to attain this thing, even the process itself keeps us from like ever really truly attaining the thing.
Yeah.
You know?
I know. And it's like, I honestly can't, oh, sorry. I think Kathrin's talking, but I can't hear her. Oh, there we go.
Oh, yeah.
No, I was just going to say, I wonder if that's like a deliberate strategy that they use to keep people coming back. I don't know. But sorry, yeah, Mexie, you were saying?
I was going to say, like, yeah, and like, yeah, I'll say all of this, but like, I can't even like, you know, promise myself that like, cause I, you know, I want to have children soon. And I can't even say that like, after I have my kids and they like fill out and then deplete and then fill out and then deplete and whatever, that I won't get a boob lift. You know what I mean? So I'm not saying that like nobody should get these, but yeah, like the framing of like, yeah, like choice feminism
I just
and
see it as
empowerment.
empowering.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I heard the same thing about like the lips and the boobs and stuff. And then something that scares me is that like this is what I heard, so it might not be wrong. It might be wrong. Is that like when you get like filler and stuff in your lips, like if you get too much, you like stretch the skin of your lips. So you create a condition where like you need to keep filling them up to that degree, because if you ever stopped, then you just have like loose lip skin, or it just looks really weird. So yeah, I mean, I think that's just like another tool of like the industry to like
It's kind of like with the vaccines. I don't know if you all have seen this, but I read a news article the other day that the vaccine companies are freaking out because the vaccines are actually more effective than they had anticipated. And so they were counting on us needing booster shots for like their stock prices. And now they're freaking out because like, oh no, the vaccine actually seems like it might be good for like years at a time.
Wow.
And I just feel that way with like so many things under capitalism. And I think, you know, like plastic surgery and these enhancements is one of those things where it's like, we're going to create this problem. And it's like the operation itself creates this problem where it's like, then you need to go back. And I think it was, I can't remember if it was for Harriet or if it was the stitches, but they said that they're like, this is an investment. And like, once you start, and I think Mexie, you may have said this as well, like once you start doing it, it's a thing you have to do. It's not like you go get this one thing done and then you just feel better and like, that's it. It's like, you are now going down this path of like, this is a thing you have to always do and maintain. And so that just, there's a ton, someone set it up thread, I think it was Salami Mommy, but that there's a lot of money to be made off insecurity. And I think that's really true. And look now, and these girls, these kids are getting stuff done at like 18, 20. I mean, they're going to be lifelong clients. That's like wild to me.
And like, sorry, I know Kathrin, you want to say something, but like, it's not inexpensive either. So it also creates like a class divide where it's like, if you're like middle class or well off enough, then you can get all these enhancements. And if you're not, then, you know, you're going to look like a regular ass person, and that's going to be ugly compared to like everyone with the enhancements, you know?
Well, and that's the thing in trans spaces too. You know, it's like, do you have the money to get your facial feminization surgery? Because most people don't, you know? And that's why, as much as I love the trans women representation we have now on the left with these bigger channels like ContraPoints and Philosophy Tube, it's also like, you know, they're having a very posh like experience of a trans femme life that a lot of people can't access, and it does create a standard that like a lot of people cannot achieve because they just do not have the access to it. Not to blame them, like say that they shouldn't do that, but it just does kind of create this sense of like, I think for a lot of people, they're probably the only trans women that they know that they've like seen transition,
Mm-hmm.
and the way that they both look is like not attainable by most people. You know, they've been able, like Natalie's very open about like how many surgeries she's had and what she's had done, and it's like most people will never be able to afford that in their lives. Kathrin, I can't hear you again.
Yeah, I can't hear you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I remember there was this ex-plastic surgeon who then went on to write a book because he was saying that there would be people who would come to him and be like, oh, I just want my a nose job, and then I'll be like happy with my appearance. But then they would like keep coming back, and they'd keep coming back, and then he realized that like doing this plastic surgery on these people wasn't the solution. It's like, and that's the thing, it's like capitalism. Of course. Yeah, capitalism is always creating insecurity so that they can sell us the solution. And I think, yeah, if it's not your nose, then it's your chin, or if it's not your chin, then it's your boobs, or if it's not your boobs, then it's something else. It's like, yeah. And I also wanted to say about the aging thing, I think it's so interesting because like with getting haggard and stuff, because I think the standards with boobs is so interesting over time, because if you're young, it's like, oh, big boobs are good. But then as soon as you get older, it's like, oh, don't have big boobs when you're 60, 70, because they'll be like super saggy. Because, yeah, so many people have said to me, whenever I'm like, oh, I wish my boobs were bigger, they're like, well, you'll love it when you're like in your 50s because you won't have saggy boobs, you'll have super packy boobs, and like you'll compare to your friends and they'll have saggy boobs and you'll be so happy. And I was like, but like it's still making us feel better in terms of comparison to others, and it also just shows like how the standards are like, if you're winning at one point in your life, then you're going to lose at another point. And it's also just like, I don't know, it just yeah.
Well, and like and by the time you're older, you're dead and no one cares about you or sees you anymore. So
you're desexualized anyway. But yeah, like speaking of the pedophilic culture, like the standards are always related to like, teens and preteens, like what they look like,
Yeah.
So it's like perky, like hopefully big if you like reach puberty or whatever, and no like signs of aging or anything, so
God, I could say so much more about this, but anyway, all right, Mexie, how are you feeling?
I do have to go pretty soon. I can maybe do a bit of after party, but I think I'm reaching my limit of screen time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I feel like we could also mention at some point, I guess, like nipples, like the differences in nipples, and like, I don't know, the expectation of like a small nipple, but simultaneously kind of erect, not too inverted, and like a certain color, and like, I don't know, too big.
And texture.
And then like the idea of a burger nipple compared, and like, oh, it can't be too big, but it's also a double standard. If you have big boobs in general, you also have bigger nipples, but it's like, so I mean, do these boobs even exist? So like the perfect ones?
As someone with bigger boobs, it's like, of course I have like bigger nipples, but whatever.
I always hated my areola, and my nipples are pretty like thin and like flat. So I always wanted like I don't know, what is the texture I'm trying to think of? Like nipples that are just really aggressive. You know what I mean? Like they're like have a texture to them, and they're more like concentrated.
Compact.
And like the nipples are bigger. I just always wanted like bigger nipples because they're really wide, but they're just like soft. They're just like it's hard to explain, but they're like this pale color, and they're just kind of, I'm like, oh, I want these like dark red like hardcore nipples. And it's so funny like to have insecurity about something that detailed, it's like,
I know,
and my nipples are wrong, like everything about my boobs is wrong.
Fuck the patriarchy, fuck capitalism, fuck the male gaze. I'm done.
I'm done. And that's it. And we're done. All right. So we're going to go into the after party, knowing that Mexie will probably have to jump off pretty quickly. Thank you all for tuning in today. The next sex stream in a month is actually, well, in like 4 weeks, is going to be about asexuality and aromanticism with some of my community members. So I'm really excited to talk about that. So let us know if you have any questions about asexuality or aromanticism so we can answer them on that stream. Thank you all for tuning in today, and we will see you in 3 minutes for the after party.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. And we're back.
And we're back.
I was reading some of the comments, and Koch said, "Does anyone remember that song? Can you tap your shoulder? Can you time it?" Yes.
Yep, I do remember that.
Well, "Do Your Boobs Hang Low?"
Yep.
I don't know who it was originally written by, so I can't credit them. But yeah, my mom used to sing that all the time for some reason.
Yeah, I remember that. One thing we didn't talk about is that, I don't know if you've experienced this, but like when I was younger and it was like, you know, some of my first experiences with men and, you know, making out and whatever, like they would be so fucking violent with my breasts. Like they would just like squeeze them like so hard. Like I would leave with bruises all over my breast just from them like squeezing them too hard. And like, you know, and I was just like, holy shit. And because I was so young, I didn't really realize. I was like, is this normal? Like it fucking hurts to make out with somebody because they're being so aggressive on my breast, you know? Like Jesus.
Yeah, it's another I just think, we can add it to the book of things that young men don't understand about bodies. But it's like, I think for a lot of them, it's like it turns them on, but I also think they think that it turns us on.
I know.
It's like that. Again, it's that idea of like everything has to be harder and like faster and more aggressive to feel good, without this awareness that like, no, it's usually, for a lot of things, it's the opposite.
Yes.
Like maybe we can build up to some of that, but like also just please stop trying to twist my boobs off of my body, because that's what it feels like you're doing.
Yeah, it's so painful. So painful.
This is a good question. Can you recommend some feminist books for someone that has barely read any? I've only had like one book on feminism. So I always like to recommend Feminism for the 99%. It's a manifesto and it's only like 50 pages long, and I feel like it's very dense, but not in a way where it's hard to read. It's actually very easy to read, but dense in the sense that they don't waste any words in that book. So like everything is like, whoa, 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 like it's really, and it's from a socialist perspective. It's not complete. I think still read other things, but I think it's a really, really good place to start.
Mm-hmm.
What about you two? You must have some books to recommend. Oh, that's the one book they've read.
Yeah, I mean, bell hooks.
Sylvia Federici.
Is
a good one.
Yeah.
To be honest, though, when you asked that question, I was like, damn, it just makes me think the majority of books that I've read on feminism have been like very liberal feminism orientated. I actually find it really difficult to think of one definitive feminist text that I'm like, yeah, this is amazing. Because especially like Caliban and the Witch is an incredible one, but it's not really a 101 situation. It's kind of like the history of magic, like the persecution of witches. But yeah, I need to look into that more. But yeah, I do like bell hooks. Angela Davis, but again, it's not really like 101 stuff. So yeah, maybe we should create one.
Yeah. Well, I know our next book club book after the one we're doing this month is Caliban and the Witch.
Nice.
So if anyone wants to join in on that, you can join the Discord.
I will join in on that because I've already read it. Usually I'm just like, oh, I can't join book clubs because I don't have any time to read, but I've already read that one. So I would love to join that.
We would love to have you there. That would be wonderful.
That was like a life-changing book.
Yeah, I'm really excited because I feel like everything we've been reading keeps referring to it. So we're all like, why don't we just read this already so we know what they're talking about? And I'm embarrassed to admit I have not read any bell hooks like books. Like obviously I've read a lot of quotes and analysis and things, but that's next on my list. I don't feel like I've read a lot of feminist work in general.
Me neither, to be honest.
Like I've just sort of been a feminist, but not really studied it as much. Yeah.
Same. Yep.
I would recommend The Will to Change by bell hooks for men in particular, because I think it really has such an empathetic approach to the way in which men are socialized, which can be super helpful for any men that are trying to dismantle this stuff and struggling with this stuff, and like just how much patriarchy harms men, not just women. And yeah, I think that was a really good one.
Yeah, I hear that one all the time. I do think the Sexual Politics of Me is a really good one to kind of get Carol Adams' analysis is not as inclusive as it probably could be, but it's still a really great, groundbreaking book for looking at the intersections of like animal commodification and sexism and misogyny.
I thought The Beauty Myth was good, and I read it a few years ago, but I think now it's kind of criticized for not being very trans inclusive and for some other reasons. But I did think it had a really good analysis on the way in which beauty is constructed and how it relates to capitalism and like, the problem with that. But again, kind of, I read it a few years ago, and I know that it's received some criticism, so I'm not sure about that one.
Yeah. And honestly, I think most books are like that. I think they're always going to have, the authors are always going to have things that they haven't experienced and don't even know to look into. And so I think just taking stuff for what you can get out of it is really helpful. because I feel like I've been finding that with all the books that I've read. Like, we even just read Transgender Marxism, and that had, I think, like 10 or 12 authors, and even within that, we still felt that there were some perspectives that were lacking, you know, in a book like that. So it's like, yeah, I think it's just hard to get a book that really does everything. Not saying people shouldn't try, but I think it's okay for us to just read something and take out of it what we will, and then read other stuff too.
Yeah. But I think it also is interesting that none of us have really read that much feminist text specifically, because it makes me think, like, damn, I think it kind of speaks to a lot of the leftist discourse around what kind of books you're supposed to read, and like, in general, I think part of the reason why I haven't read that much on feminism is because it's never at the forefront of, like, oh, this is what you're supposed to read. There's always, like, other things that I'm like, oh, to be a leftist, I need to read this and this. Yeah, it's definitely a gap I want to fill. But also, maybe it's also just that there hasn't been that much, like, critical, like, actually, that's not true. There probably has. I just don't know about it.
Yeah.
Well, and I think sometimes you just, like, get it. Or at least that's how I am. I'm like, because I haven't read a lot of anarchist books either, but I'm just like, yeah. When I heard about anarchism, I was like, yeah, that makes sense. I don't really need to read up all about it. I just kind of get it. And that's sort of how I feel about feminism. There's an Instagram account called Saved by the Bell Hooks. I'm going to follow that immediately.
Yeah, me too.
Like, I know I haven't read, what is it, Judith Butler yet? But their books keep coming up, like Gender Trouble, and I also have the Force of Nonviolence, I think it's called.
I haven't read those.
I read Gender Trouble in, like, grad school. And yeah, it was, I mean, it's written in, like, a really inaccessible way that it doesn't need to be written that way. like from what I distilled from the message, I was like, this could have been said, you know. Anyway, but it was really interesting, like, kind of like the concept of performativity and, like, how gender is a performance, and, like, it's an iterative performance. And so, yeah, like, that concept was really, really powerful and I think influential, but otherwise I'm not sure. I'd have to revisit that. I'm not sure I took a ton more from that, but
well, that's sort of my critique too with the left, and, like, how we talk about books and how everyone's supposed to have read the same like foundational books, and it's like, but a lot of those are not accessible, and a lot of them are not even really relevant today, but they did inspire other people to do work that is relevant today. So it's like, why wouldn't I just not read the stuff that's coming out today that is more accessible and more applicable to my situation?
Yeah.
And just have an understanding that, sure, this was inspired by something else, but that doesn't mean I have to go read that thing. I can just read, you know, the current works about stuff if I'm not an academic, you know. I think, sure, if you're working on your own critical theory, then, like, it might make sense to go back to the basics and read everything. But I just think for, like, your average person, we should stop putting so much pressure on everyone to have read the same stuff.
Yeah, 100%. And everyone has different learning styles. So for some people, watching YouTube videos or podcasts or visual stuff or having conversations is a much more effective way of learning. So yeah, it doesn't always have to be from books. And also, it takes a lot of time and energy, which most of us don't have anyway. So yeah. I also want to read Glitch Feminism. I know that, Nicole, I've been talking about that with you. And I know because I heard about it from For Harriet, who seemed to really like it. So I think that's a really interesting one as well.
That's our book club after Caliban and the Witch. We're going to do Glitch Feminism. Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. Like, glitch feminism, like, that's exciting to me. That's something, like, cyber feminism is this whole new thing I don't know about. So I'm like, yeah, I want to read that. But I'm sure that book was inspired by a lot of other stuff that I just don't feel I have to go read. Yeah, I think we're caught up on comments.
I also think it's interesting the point you made about how not all books are going to include every perspective, and how we do have this very kind of puritanical view of like, oh, you can't recommend that because it didn't include this voice or that voice. But it's like you said, we can take it for what it is and still criticize it, but still there's something to be learned from those books. But it's almost like you feel afraid to be like, to recommend something in case it's not, I don't know, in case it has something problematic. But like most of these old people, these like old theorists have something problematic. Like,
it's like Adrienne Maree Brown, like everyone can be my teacher, like having the humility to take things and be like, and instead of like think about critiquing them or like whatever, slamming their perspective down, just think about like, what can I learn here? You're like, you know.
Yeah, and I think there's, something to be said, like if there is something that's more inclusive that you could recommend instead, then do that. I think we can always think about which voices we're promoting, but I think there's also just work that's been done that's good to know. And just understand that it doesn't represent everyone's work. Because a lot of times, like a lot of the stuff I've read that will be inclusive of that viewpoint is building off of the original work. So again, it just goes back to like, if you want to read the foundations or the origins of something, or if you just want to read the new thing that might be more inclusive and more progressive. Like I love Carol Adams, like as a human, she's very sweet. And, I find her book really useful. And as of right now, I don't know of anyone who has really taken that work and taken it into a trans space. But if they had, then, like I would recommend that either in conjunction with or instead of, to be like, now you can hear this perspective that's been expanded on and refined.
That would be great.
Sometimes you have to like go back to, sometimes it's like, this is the thing right now. Like, I don't know where else to point you.
Yeah, I'm like, oh, that's for the vegan movement. Like, that needs to be a thing that happens.
It does need to be a thing. And maybe it is happening and I just haven't heard of it. But it's like, but that's what happens, as we all build off each other's work. And we certainly need to be doing work to make sure that it's not just these voices that get like the initial claim to certain ideas, because I'm sure there's other people who had the same ideas but weren't able to get access to being published or being heard and having a formal education, all of these other opportunities. But when it comes to what you've read and what you recommend, I think we need to be a little bit more relaxed and not feel like we're going to get canceled if we recommend something that isn't like perfect. Because to this day, no matter how marginalized the author has been, I've still not read a book where it's like, oh yeah, every perspective was perfectly accounted for in this. There's always something where it's like, oh yeah, you could have expanded more on this, or you kind of missed this thing here. And I think like that's fine. We just need to let people be people.
Yeah.
And also I feel like so much of the time what is recommended is just recommended just because it's like, oh, everyone else is recommending it. Like the My Body Is Not an Apology book. And I mean, maybe I just didn't get it. I was like, why is everyone so obsessed with this book? I just felt like I just did not understand. And it does make me wonder how much is this accessibility to constantly seeing reviews on everything. It's like, okay, thousands of people have given this a 5-star review. Now I'm immediately going to form this opinion that this is great, or I'm immediately going to recommend it even though I haven't read it, or say that I read it just so I can be part of. I don't know. It's really strange.
Yeah. The Goober asked, is that more of a problem if the author is still alive? I think it can be. I think it depends on, because like for me, I know like Carol Adams has said like, oh, I'm aware now, like I've learned and I understand. And I think when she did I think she wrote a book more recently, and there may have been like a newer edition of that book. And I know she tried to address some of the gaps that were in her analysis initially. So I think especially if the author's alive and they're like, I'm aware and like, I just didn't have that perspective and like, I acknowledge that and I'm trying to do better, then I think that's cool. If you have an author who's like fuck those people. Yeah, maybe don't promote their work and give them more money. But I also, I don't know, I guess this could be a conversation, but I personally do not, I think it's kind of a slippery slope to say that we're not allowed to read certain things because the author isn't perfect. You know, like if I get a copy of something from the library, that's not like benefiting the author directly. And there may still be things that I take from that. I don't know.
Yeah. I also think we need to normalize like reading fiction as a way to learn about issues. And I think that honestly, I feel like fiction has taught me more about social issues, or at least maybe not taught me more, but had more of an impact on me than so many of the nonfiction books that I've read. And I say that as someone who's read a lot of nonfiction from university and stuff, but I really think there's something about the story element and the like emotional element of the fiction that often just like impregnates into your soul on such a deep level that like you really understand. Like Ursula Le Guin, her ideas on anarchism, somehow like, I don't know, the stories about it really helped me to understand anarchism better. Or Mallory Blackman with like her books on racism, Noughts and Crosses, and like those things really impacted me so much. And so yeah, I think we need to normalize fiction as well.
Yeah, and like speculative fiction, I love like all of that.
Yeah. Well, Mex, do you have to go? I don't want to keep you.
Yeah, I gotta go.
Your eyeballs to fall out.
But this has been so great. Yeah, I fucking love our sex streams. They're so fun.
They are fun.
They're so fun, and I think they like people are into them. Like I think they could help people who I don't know. Yeah,
I hope so.
I hope so too.
Hanging out and talking about stuff, I think, is really fun, and yeah, I think we all can learn something when we do. Because I know, like, I even love the comments. To me, are so awesome to like in real time get other people's experiences and thoughts. You know, it's just such a nice thing to do. So yeah, thanks,
absolutely.
girls.
Yeah, well, thanks everybody. It was so great, and I can't wait to rejoin whatever our next sex stream is in a few months.
We'll have to plan that out later.
My phone is also about to die, so I think I'm going to have to go as well.
Yeah, I'm ready to turn my AC back on and live my best life.
And chill out.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. And as I mentioned, join us on the next one for Ace and Arrow chat. Talk about, some marginalized identities that most people do not understand at all. I'm really excited for that.
That's going to be awesome.
I can't wait.
I'm excited. I know. All right, everyone. We'll see you on the next one.
Bye.